Hey guys, Vinnie Mirchandani here. Real pleasure to have Amit Shah. He is CIO at Excelitas, like in Veritas Technologies, which is an optics and photonics spin-off from PerkinElmer, based in the Silicon Valley. I'm going to let Amit introduce himself and talk a little bit more about the company, and this is going to be a really exciting conversation. They've had an amazing last 3 or 4 months. Amit, welcome aboard. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the company.
Thanks, Vinnie. Looking forward to this great conversation. So Amit Shah, I'm CIO at Excelitas. Excelitas was founded back in 2010, as you mentioned, as a spin-off from PerkinElmer. And since then, we have changed hands a couple of times with 2 different private equity firms. Excelitas is a technology leader in what we call optoelectronics and optics market space. We serve 5-6 different end markets: defense and aerospace, medical, industrial, safety and security, as well as consumer. And we are essentially what we call light people. We create light, we sense light, we bend light, and we use different technologies to do that. We are in 17 different locations, 10 different countries. A significant portion of our manufacturing is in Asia, but we have manufacturing in Germany, UK, as well as in Canada and parts of US as well. I've been with the company for, as I said, from day one, and responsible for all things IT, as well as supporting some of our engineering organizations in their software development efforts as well.
So you mentioned you're a light company.
Yes.
With the COVID-19, thermal scans and UV sanitation, my God, new markets must have opened up overnight for you.
Absolutely. Not only new markets have opened up, the demand for our existing product with our existing customers have gone up significantly in certain areas, especially in sensing temperature and so on and so forth. So it's been very interesting last 4 months. Parts of our business has grown in 3-4x, and some parts of our business is stagnant or struggling a little bit. But I think in aggregate, we have done some amazing work in the last 3-4 months to keep the factories up and running and continue to expand with our existing customers, as well as NPIs and new markets as well.
So Amit, it's been feast or famine, right? But we've seen amazing heroics, obviously, in healthcare. We've seen auto companies jump in, try to make medical ventilators. We've seen banks with 4 million PPP loans for small businesses. We've seen last mile logistics, unbelievable, right? So there have been a lot of heroics in different industries. Not too many people know about your industry. I'm sure you had some amazing, you said 17 locations, some amazing heroics across your shop floors, your R&D, et cetera. Go ahead and tell us about that, and be as generous as you want to your colleagues.
I think first and foremost, I would like to share with you and others that Excelitas was deemed essential in all of the geography where we operate. So in a sense, we got lucky. Most part of our factories were open, with exception of one of our locations in the past. But for most part, all of our locations were open. So I think the first thing we had to tackle is getting the workforce ready to work in this new environment, making our shop floor ready for social distancing protocols. And since we are in 10 different countries, they all had a little different approach in the beginning, doing shifts which are not overlapping too much, allow cleanup in between the shifts to make sure our employees feel safe and secure working in that kind of environment. So I think the first and foremost, our EHS and what we call COVID task force did a fantastic job of putting what we call layered framework to make sure our employees feel safe and secure coming to work and continue to make products which saves lives in this particular environment. Within IT, what we did was I put what I call 3-pronged approach, right? So our first and foremost approach was to respond to this crisis. And when you're in crisis management mode, a lot of time you have to kind of short circuit some of your protocols, but focus on achieving the outcome you're trying to achieve. And for us, that outcome was to keep our office workers or knowledge workers productive as they start working from home, and also some of our factory floor workers who needed access to machines and other equipment on the shop floor. So my job was to facilitate that particular outcome. To do that, we did a lot of WAN re-engineering. We had to kind of accelerate our SD-WAN deployment as well as SASE deployment. We increased the bandwidth throughout our company and make sure that we are constantly monitoring that situation, making sure all the traffic flows smoothly, right? So that was our first prong, if you will. The second, what I call the stabilization and fine-tuning phase, if you will, where we looked at things which once you do your initial crisis response, then you look at things like, okay, how can we make sure our demand chain and supply chain are working together? What kind of reports, what kind of analytics we need to produce so we can match the high variability in our demand with our supply chain? How do we manage supply chain risk? And this is where, you know, having SAP and some other ERP system was very helpful. We were able to fine-tune our approach and kind of make sure that our factories are getting the parts they need to make the products for our customer. And I think third prong or the third approach was observing at a very highest level what kind of strategy shift within IT we'll have to do going forward to accommodate not only this crisis but a similar crisis in the future. And that, you know, that boils down to 2 or 3 things for me. First and foremost, accelerated migration to the cloud and SaaS environment where possible. 2, security and integration becomes very important, right? So we want to make sure all the cloud or multi-cloud environment we live in, it's secure, because we have to comply with 5 different defense regulations and few other regulations in medical devices and some other industries. So we want to make sure everything we do was in a compliant manner with our cloud, and the data integration in this multi-cloud environment needs to be very sophisticated to make sure the data flow is smooth to create the analytics we want to create at the end of the day. So having, you know, some of the software vendor we use like SAP and Microsoft was definitely very helpful. So the way I think about this going forward is the crisis response is already done. You know, we kind of stabilize our environment and make sure people are productive. The stabilization period is almost done as well, but the strategic shift is still happening, right? In certain case, we are pulling some of our strategic projects to the left and kind of investing now rather than next year. And in certain case, we are delaying some of the projects where we see the value might not be there. So overall, you know, this whole COVID-19 challenges in a manner which we never thought we would be. But I always tell my team, you know, crisis is a terrible thing to waste, and we always try to learn from a crisis like this. And we are still learning, right? You know, things are changing on a weekly basis, and we want to make sure no matter what happens tomorrow, we are agile enough to respond to the new world and get ready for the next normal. You know, people talk about new normal. I call it next normal, because that new normal continues to change every week for me.
Amit, it's interesting. I've interviewed a number of companies that shut down, and now looking at coming back, it almost sounds like you, being an essential, didn't need to truly shut down. May have been actually easier for you rather than shutting down and going through a whole bunch of new protocols to open up again. Would you say that's true, or?
I think initially it was hard because, as I suggested, we work in 10 different geographies, and our workforce comes, like, let me give you an example. You know, in Asia, we have a workforce coming from different countries, and we have a big location in Singapore, but they come from Malaysia and Indonesia, and dealing with lockdowns in different countries and, you know, different rules for testing and so on and so forth was hard. But you're right. In the end, since we're operating, it made a little bit easier on us to respond versus if we had to shut down and then reopen and rethink everything from scratch. Overall, we feel we were blessed, but the first few weeks were absolutely fairly hectic for us to kind of settle down in this new operating environment. Yeah,
in fact, I'm surprised you still have dark hair.
Maybe I died.
So talk a little bit more about your SAP environment. Are you on-premise? Are you moving to the cloud? And tell us about also your work from home. I've heard from a number of CIOs that their cloud applications did much better. Now, yep. Given your industries, aerospace and defense and so on, maybe you can be completely in the cloud. But talk a little bit about your SAP environment and how it reacted to the work from home and so on.
Sure. So our traditional ECC SAP environment is in our co-location data centers. We have a number in different geography to comply with different data residency and other regulations. But starting last year, we were rethinking of our strategy going forward as we adopt S/4HANA. So for us, our future lies with S/4HANA. We will continue to put our existing ECC instance on S/4HANA, as well as we want to make sure all of our future integration and future rollouts are done on S/4HANA. So for S/4HANA, we went back to the drawing board. We looked at all options, right? We looked at public SaaS kind of cloud. Well, it doesn't work for us for a number of reasons, but most importantly for the modules or the approach we were taking called central finance for our finance organization, it just doesn't work in a multi-tenant public cloud environment. So that was checked off. Then we looked at either running application in our own data center or co-location, or in a single tenant environment with a hosting company, for lack of a better term, which meets with all of our government, ITAR and defense regulations. So we looked at a number of providers, and we decided to go with one of the SAP subsidiary called NS2. So that is our strategy for the future. We want to make sure we take advantage of all the innovation which happens in a single tenant cloud environment. And I think a couple of things which caught my eye in terms of why it makes sense to go with the single tenant cloud environment for SAP. I think number one is compliance. We can obviously build our own environment, run everything in our own data center, but if somebody can offer that and give the same outcome, maybe at reasonable cost, then why not have them focus on that, which allows me and my organization to focus on high value add activity. And two, as SAP evolves, it's very evident to me that a lot of the innovation is going to happen in the cloud. And the release strategy for S/4HANA is, it goes in the public cloud first, then it comes to SDE, then it goes to the on-prem. And you can ask any CIO, and they will tell you that one of the biggest challenges running SAP or any complex ERP environment is to do a continuous upgrade, because that requires a lot of work for IT organization as well as business. But if we can quote unquote outsource that and have somebody else do it for us much faster with reduced risk, that allows me to present all the innovation done by SAP to my business in a much faster manner. So I think that caught my eye, and overall just the idea of evolving in the cloud made a lot of sense for us, because our business strategy is to continue to grow through inorganic growth as well as organic growth. And when you have that kind of business strategy, your IT strategy and your operating environment in IT has to align with your business outcomes. And I felt going forward, it made a lot more sense to do that in a STE or single tenant environment, which is offered by SAP.
And the work from home was, you said it took effort, but it sounded like you didn't have as much of an issue as some of the other on-premise shops. Yeah,
so I think since we have a number of data centers which are in different locations, we responded pretty well in the first few weeks of COVID crisis by redesigning our wide area network, accelerating our SD-WAN rollout, as well as our rollout for some of the communication and collaboration platform, which were anyway moving towards cloud. We just accelerated that. So it wasn't that challenging. Obviously, there was a panic initially in our user community, but I think with effective communication, we kind of calmed that down. We put a very detailed framework together. We communicated that effectively throughout our different geographies, and that gave people confidence that we are ready, right? We have tools, we have technologies, things like Teams, for example, or Zoom, for example, which will allow us to continue to effectively communicate even though we are not able to travel. And then we put a roadmap as we tackle different situation unique to maybe, let's say, engineering organization or our field service organization, like remote assist from Microsoft. We are evaluating that right now as we realize that our technical engineers, application engineers cannot visit the customer for fixing some of the issues or just keeping in touch with their engineers. So we are trying to use AR kind of approach to that, where we are testing HoloLens with Microsoft Remote Assist and see if we can interact with our customer in that manner. So in the end, we felt pretty good about our response, and overall what we did was kind of pull in some of our projects which were in flight and kind of accelerated those projects.
Let's switch gears a little bit. So, obviously out of this crisis, because supply chains have been so dramatically affected, there appears to be a sentiment for bringing some of the manufacturing closer to where the end market is. Do you think that's just political talk? Are you seeing other high-tech companies act on it? What's your perspective on that?
Well, to be frank with you, we are well ahead of the curve. Working for private equity owners, I think politics doesn't play a huge role in our business strategy. It boils down to the value creation for the investors and the board. So we have been doing insourcing for a while, to be frank with you. And a lot of our insourcing business case were driven by the financial strategy and creating jobs for ourselves rather than creating jobs for our supplier, right? Why do we want them to have our EBITDA? In the end, any private equity-owned company is there to create value for their investor through expanding their EBITDA. And for us, the insourcing started a while back. If anything, with COVID, some of our insourcing efforts were validated because we were able to keep our factories open, but some of our suppliers were not open because they were not deemed necessary. And because we insource, we were able to kind of continue to make the products we need to make to serve the markets we have to serve. So for us, it's definitely not a political decision. It's driven by our business strategy and creating the financial value for our investors.
That's a really nice answer, because I've heard a lot of politics are coming into the decision, but just about everyone is saying they're evaluating the supply chain. On the manufacturing side, what do you see? More automation? What are you seeing shop floor wise? More hygiene focus? Tell us about some of the changes you're seeing.
Yeah, so I think this is a fantastic question. Our COO had this vision a while back to start putting foundation for Industry 4.0 and related technologies, right? In the end, we make products which requires fabs, which requires what we call optical shops, which requires some discrete manufacturing approach. And in those industries, and things haven't changed in a long time, but with the democratization of IT-like technology available to shop floor, we started rethinking how we want to define and redesign our shop floor starting back in 2016-17. We call that advanced manufacturing internally, but it's basically a framework we have put together which is designed around Industry 4.0. So what does it mean? Well, first and foremost, automation where possible, right? So we are looking at opportunities for automation either through robotics or using cobots. So we use robots and cobots in some of our area. More digitization of our shop floor. So deploying or expanding the use cases of systems like MES. Collect more data around your yield and scrap. Visualization of that data. Our work cells have cell specific information which allows the team lead for that particular work cell to make decision in real time. Aggregating our OEE data, so understand the overall equipment effectiveness throughout our factory network is very important because we want to understand where our bottlenecks are. So deploying a global OEE package was very important. So we started all this a while back, right? So if you think about, at a high level, we basically did three things. First and foremost, automation wherever possible. And we do a use case in one factory, and then if it works, then we roll out globally. Two, understand how the data flows on the shop floor and increase the velocity of that data. right? And when you increase the velocity of that data, in theory, you are also empowering the decision maker to make decision fast. So that was number two. And number three is presenting sales specific information using analytics to our shop floor guys. And all of their workflows are now built around using this analytics on a daily, sometimes hourly basis, and making those decisions in real time. So as your demand fluctuates, obviously you need to have systems like SAP, which can respond to that demand fluctuation, do the supply chain planning accordingly. Once the supply is delivered to the shop floor, you want to make sure you are agile enough to change your patterns to meet the demand. Let's say you want to make product A more and product B less because your product A has a significant growth because of COVID-19. So the agility significantly improved because we started using some of this Industry 4.0 concepts.
So I've been asking every executive I interview, what do you see in terms of the economy? It sounds like you never slowed down. In fact, you've accelerated. But do you see a V-sharp rebound? You see a U, a gradual recovery? You see a W, up and down with flare-ups and different regions going differently? Or do you see an L, which is, it's going to be dead for a while, at least in some markets?
I'll give you this answer in two different personas. One, me being CIO of Excelitas, and second, just my personal view. I think for my company, as you mentioned, we are pretty lucky to not shutting down most of our factories in the last 3-4 months. And
you've had amazing new markets open up, it sounds like.
Yeah, so if anything, we never felt different in terms of overall pattern of our demand and supply. Obviously, if you look at it on a daily or weekly basis, there were a lot of variance, but for most part, we have been pretty healthy in terms of our economic performance, and we feel we will stay healthy in coming weeks and months. Personally, I believe we will go through a W-like recovery phase. If you look at the equity market, which is obviously well ahead of the economy, but when you look at flare-ups now in California, Florida, Texas, so on and so forth. Also, parts of Asia where we have significant presence, things are not completely gone away. So I strongly believe you're going to see up and down approach to the recovery. We might even see second wave, as people like to call. And I strongly believe that in second half, there will be some corrections in the equity market to reflect the reality on the ground.
So are the COVID markets, that new ones you opened up, are you investing in those, or are you kind of seeing those as a short-term opportunity?
I think, as I mentioned, for us, a lot of our existing customers and a lot of our existing product continue to grow because the demand shot up. Thermometry is a great example where we sell sensors. We are considered one of the top in the world. And we are also evaluating some of the NPIs to enter into different geographies or different end markets. I think for us, we are making sure no matter what we do meets our business plan, right? So we are not getting overly excited for some of this NPI with blip and kind of dies down in few quarters. We want to stick to our business plan and make sure we are able to create the value for our investors.
That's a great perspective. Any final thoughts for other executives? Or?
I think, look, as I mentioned earlier, crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And this is a great opportunity to kind of adopt.
I think Churchill said that.
I think Churchill said that, no doubt. And I agree with his view of the world in a lot of areas, but especially in this particular world we live in. This is once in a lifetime crisis, and nobody was prepared for that. But it's a great opportunity to adopt and accelerate your innovation curve. In our case, we have done that, whether on the shop floor, whether in IT. We saw this as an opportunity to invest in area where we know it's going to create value for us as a company and for our investor class, right? So that's number one. Number two, I strongly believe in what I call my 4P framework, which is people, process, product, project. First and foremost, take care of your people. Understand their needs as employee, as human beings, and make sure they feel secure and healthy to work in your company. So that's number one. You need to have processes, whether it's a business process, IT process, finance process. You need to build processes which allows you to operate effectively and change as the environment around you changes, right? So that's number two. The product part, when I say product, I mean, partners like SAP or Microsoft or people who in my world, in IT world, allows me to create the value I'm tasked to create, right? So I need to have the right product to create right processes and to create right outcomes. And the last one is what I call project, means you need to have project-driven approach to execute some of the things you need to execute in IT world. So I strongly believe in this 4P framework as I continue to manage this situation and in general. I think the last one is, I have seen this in the past, and our CEO strongly believes in this, which is, even though this is once in a lifetime event, investing in people and R&D pays off in the long run. I don't care what's your capital structure. I don't care what's your industry. In the end, you need to have right people and the right products. And to do that, you need to continue to invest in both. So invest in R&D no matter what's happening outside in the economy. Invest in your people. And when things do get to normal or the next normal, if you've invested in this too, more likely than not, you will be stronger than you were before the crisis. And I have seen that in 2009, financial crisis, when I used to work for a different firm. That firm continued to invest in R&D, and when it came out of the financial crisis, they gained bigger market share and created more value for their investors. That's a
great perspective. R&D quite often gets cut in a recession, and it's the wrong time to do it.
Amit, and our CEO doesn't do that. I love him for the fact that he continued to invest in R&D even in this last, tough 4 or 5 months.
Well, Amit, thank you so much. This has been very, very, you've covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vinnie. This was a great conversation.